Hello, fellow Greek gods of baseball. This is Kurt
Oh, that's
Imber,
gonna stick.
GM of the San Fernando Bears. You're stuck with it. And I'm joined by Ron Collins, GM of the Bikini Krill. We're here recording BBA today, episode number 104. I figured out how to use the camera on my laptop today, so hopefully we have a better quality recording, and also we now get this very dramatic lighting that I've got it going on in my downstairs office. Ron, how are you doing today?
What Kurt is not telling you is that there is an attack going on in the San Fernando Bears organization, and Kurt has fled to the bunker down below, the bomb shelter bunker down below, because his Bears have gone 7-3 in the last 10 games, and that cannot happen. We need to stop that right away. But yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm doing great. It's a fun time of the year. We're here in mid-May. We've just finished earlier than normal the draft, and lots of all the BBA teams have gotten their, and GBC teams, I think, have gotten their draft picks. Several of them are signed. I know I still have two of them that are hanging out, waiting. They are considering my pending offer per OOTP, which is annoying. They should just sign the dang thing.
Break.
But yeah, the draft was quite quick today. This time through, what were your thoughts? I know you pay a lot of attention to the draft, like I do. I believe you were drafting all the way through to the end. I kind of bailed after about 14, I think, 12 or 14, which is unusual for me. But I just couldn't find. We talked last time through that I thought that we'd be into 12 and 13 and 14 and I would still be finding players. And I found, I guess by the time I got to 12, I was really kind of done. I think I made my 13th pick and then I put it on auto from there. Did not keep my number 15 draft pick from winning $6 million, though.
There was one of those down there, huh?
I saw that and I said, well, I won $6 million too. Nah.
I had like an 18th round pick want like $430,000 or something like that, and I was like, "Come on, dude, you're gonna get cut anyways. Just sign and get to spend 2 weeks, training in my training facility or whatever."
You get 2 weeks of
Couldn't.
fantasy camp.
Yeah, what are you doing trying to hold out for a couple hundred grand? Yeah, I think I made a list like around the 8th or ninth round that lasted me into like the 11th round or something. But I'm already cutting guys, yeah, that were drafted in the teens and upwards. I've noticed none of those have really stuck. I was trying to just sort by some of the ratings and just put, get the guy with the highest avoid K left or whatever, and then I look at the guy like in depth a little bit later when I'm not on my phone, and I'm like, oh, okay, well he's got a 3 in every other skill set, so probably not going to stick around. Yeah, wasn't it actually wasn't really a deep class, I don't think. And I don't know if it's the class or just a reflection of sort of where, well, everything's relative, right? So I guess it was a weak class. But like compared to the players already out in the universe, for the draft, we had some 35 potentials in the free agent pool and a bunch of 30s. And I know that those scores aren't perfect or whatever. It's just the game approximating it. But there weren't really guys above 30 left by the time we got to round 14 or 15. It was a bunch of 30s and 25s and whatnot getting taken towards the end, and all of the decent looking, 35s had already been kind of figured out by GMs by the 8th, ninth, 10th round. So,
I hate it that
um,
the GMs are paying attention.
yeah,
You
there's,
know,
there's, there's a very active group in the draft, especially this year. We had a shorter, we kept the shorter time limit starting in round 3, I think, and I didn't really hear anybody complaining about it because I think people were so like kind of locked in, and it goes quickly because people are paying attention too, right? That means people aren't just failing to set up a list or not setting, flipping their toggle back and forth or not paying attention. So the other thing about the draft is just how early we got it loaded. And the last few years, there's been all these guys who are like already 40 overalls, 45 overalls, pretty developed. And those guys don't really need to go to short season ball. So it actually kind of matters that the draft was loaded in earlier because like I'm putting a guy in double A and a couple of my pitchers in A ball right off the bat. So they're going to get a couple extra sims to play for better or worse because sometimes they've thrown 60, 70 innings in college, and I don't know that I want them to pitch that many innings. But it's cool to like get to play with your new toys
Yeah.
sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I think that was Alan's quippy comment about, well, I need to slow the draft down so I don't have to face Carlos Cruz. With
Yeah,
Madison
right.
is that's the big that is probably the big draft question around the BBA right this minute is, do you think Carlos Cruz is going to go directly into the BBA? I haven't actually seen Mike make a direct comment about what he's going to do there.
Shrouded in mystery. Yeah.
Yeah, but that was my one question when people suggested that he go straight to the BBA is, I've got a similar, I put a team news on my own Phil Glass, he's got 62 innings on his arm this year in college. I think Carlos Cruz is in that range. How if you're Mike Simon and you're trying to build a team and get fan interest going and all that other good stuff, how do you, if you were in his shoes, how would you play it? Would Carlos Cruz be in the bigs?
Yeah. I wouldn't I think it kind of relates to some of the stuff going on right now in like Major League Baseball, which is so these guys who can throw like 100 miles an hour or whatever, and I don't remember if Cruz throws 100, but the idea that they only got so many bullets in their arm, so to speak, like he's ready. He doesn't need to develop. Like he's going to destroy whatever. You can put him in AAA, he's going to destroy it. And that you're not going to wait out, I don't think, like the Super 2 date probably, because that's pretty late in our league. It's a little bit later than I think it is in the majors. Like I want to say you've said before, you think it's like it moves. First of all, it's a calculation, but like what,
Yeah.
like July or something to be
It
safe?
it
Like
moves in the majors too, by definition.
yeah, just by more like a week or so, I think. Whereas in our league, it feels like it can shift like a month or something in either direction, maybe. But
Yeah, and I think I was thinking about that. I think one of the questions might be that it might be earlier now because we have such a young set of baseball players, right? Our teams are quite younger. We're having more players come in having more teams question whether to wait the 2 weeks or however long it is for the adding the extra service year in, which by definition means you've got more players coming in at that stage, which means you'll have more players in the Super 2 pool, which draws that date in closer, right? You can literally go and calculate it at any particular moment. The danger with that, especially as you're 2 years out from it, is that, if I pull a Fernando Bushy out of the major league pool and plug him into my minors, which I just did last week, that influences where that line is, right?
yeah.
And I'm not manipulating anything there. Bushy just sucks. I'm not trying to play any games. And if anyone is trying to, if someone is trying to calculate things based on exactly that line, I wrote a team news way back many years ago about the difference of what a difference a sim can make when my pitcher, Crash Lelouch, was called up one sim too early, right? And it cost him, or it cost me, it cost the team a chunk of money, right? And everyone says, well, that's good because he was worth the money. Well, the guy who missed because of him lost millions of dollars, right? The player missed just simply because he was one player past the limit, right? it's a
Yeah.
harsh game in that sense, and it is really hard to calculate when you're down into that single number. So yeah, if I were the owner of Carlos Cruz, I would not be thinking about Super 2 in the question. The only thing that I personally would be thinking about, and I have been thinking about it because of Paul Glass, who is not the candidate, not the quality of player as Cruz. But the fundamental question is, he's got 60 innings in his arm. Is he ready to go jump straight into the bigs? He is almost as developed as he's ever going to get. He's got, I think, a point in movement or control, and obviously his stuff is down. But he just bumped stuff a couple months ago, right? So there's a chance that he may bump it again. You never know. But the main point is, he's got 62 innings on his arm, and do I want to stress him right away? The second piece is, it's been 2.5 to 3 months since he pitched, so there is likely some rust set up. I believe that if I were the owner of Cruz, I would have the same thought pattern as I'm having with Glass, and almost certainly Glass is going to start in AAA and throw a game or two in AAA to see if the rust is there. At which stage I will probably call him up, because he's developed as he's as he's going to be, and I need a starter. So that's probably where I would be at. I think I would hold Cruz back. I don't know. That's an interesting question for Madison, who is clearly not going to be going into the playoffs. Is there any value in having him pitch in AAA versus the bigs, right? For me, I'm actually working toward, I have aspirations of winning a division, right? I don't want to have a outing or two with Glass where he just gets annihilated because he's got rust. He might get annihilated because he's got 3 stuff or 2 stuff, but we'll find that out. That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Right?
But the floor is a little higher for you too. You have a pretty, we might get into it later, but your pitchers are doing pretty darn well. Especially, more so, especially your bullpen. But you have a good top end too. And Madison, the difference between Cruz pitching and their 5th starter, it's a wider gap. So you could just go 50 pitch limit, 75, slowly build it up or something, and I couldn't blame Madison for doing a couple of sims in AAA, but I can't really imagine shooting for like that Super 2 date, waiting like a month and a half. The future is now. And they have a 19-year-old shortstop who was just drafted last year, so clearly Mike's not like the cautious type. Boyd Fitzgerald's not fully developed. He's still got a couple of ratings that need to come in, and he's there. He's playing every day and playing well for them. So if anything, they've got the blueprint right there as to what Cruz is capable of.
Yeah, and like I said, to me, the idea of keeping him in AAA would be simply around the idea of trying to avoid the rust. But then on the other side of the question, for somebody like Cruz, if his skill level is up here and he loses 20% due to rust, he's still probably better than anyone else who's going to pitch. So that probably doesn't play in my brain if I were Madison. It'll be fun. These are the fun things to watch.
It could be that his risk of injury is the highest, like throwing his first few pitches too. So there's also the argument to start in AAA, so that if they get hurt, they can go on the minor league IL and not accrue service time.
That is fair, because what I was going to say is you could just drop him into a 30 pitches or something like that limit. But still, yes, just like the Justin Rosenblatt injury with the Rule 5 guy, right? If he gets injured, then he has to accrue service time. While he's on the major league roster.
I don't think they can make a wrong decision with Mr. Cruz. I think it's going to work out okay either way. Just would be a bummer to not see him pitch at all in the Brewster this year.
Well, let's talk about the overall standing. Like I said, we're in mid-May. May 15th, I think, is the date. I have to look at the game for sure. May 14th. May 14th.
Yep.
I'm a day ahead. There you go. I'm this future-looking guy. I would, when I scan down the list, I say, well, there's not a whole lot of major surprises, but it is still a um, super competitive moment. What are your thoughts when you look at where we are at here on May 14th of 2063?
Now we're a fourth of the way in now. We've doubled the number of games played since the last time we spoke, and now it's a pretty good sample size. And I think I've mentioned before, I usually kind of shoot for the Billy Bean school of thought to try to wait till around June 1st to really shake up things too much. So we're like a couple sims from that point, but I do think we're at the point where there's a few teams in each league that look like it'd be very surprising if they missed the playoffs. I guess I should look at the playoff odds to confirm that suspicion. But uh, what do we got here? Yeah, we've got some 90 upper 90% happening in the Atlantic, for example, and Portland as well. Interestingly, Nashville, not one of those teams that's 90+%, but in my head they are. So there's a few teams like that, and then there's a handful of teams that are starting to think about 2064. I think, I think Cobble Hill's bubble has been burst. I don't think they're winning 82 games this year. Valencia knew what they were getting into, and it's been confirmed. And there's a few other teams like that, but then there's still a scrum in the middle where it's like, Aaron's pretty down on Vancouver, and we talked about my team's slow start, and we're on the low end of potentially making anything happen, and you're kind of on the high end of that. But ultimately, I think we're kind of in the same tier, which is nothing is really guaranteed one way or the other. So that's how I look at the teams at this point. It's kind of like very much a playoff team, very much not a playoff team, and then this huge group in between where we're still sorting things out over the next 4 to 6 sims.
Yeah, and you know, I'm tempted to basically say injuries are going to make a
Mm-hmm.
difference as you go forward. I mean, for example, I
Sure.
mean, maybe we can talk about it in a little bit. Charm City just lost Dave Ackerman for a bit. What he's out until essentially the All-Star break,
Mm-hmm.
and suddenly Charm City finds themselves second to Montreal, which Montreal has been leading the division for chunks of the season. I think Charm City was ahead at the last time we chatted, or maybe it was just last sim. I can't remember which.
Yeah.
Charlotte is working their way back into the picture without Jaquat Nata. So there's another injury impact that has caused things. I mean, Montreal has their own problem with Serrano is out. So you've got the three top teams in the Atlantic are all playing with injury, with one injury tied behind their back.
Mm-hmm.
um, so that's definitely a fascinating thing. I saw John in Atlantic City was talking about possibly trading their shortstop prospect. I think they're very happy with the shortstop they have right now, and so um, you never know what kind of big trade might come in to affect the nuances of things too. Um, I don't. I kind of play the Billy Bean idea too, but I note that we're still 2.5 weeks away from the first part of June. So I try not to read too much into the percentages right now, except that I like to see mine high no matter what, just because it makes me happy.
Yeah.
um, and Nashville is an interesting case. You mentioned Nashville is not one of those teams. They're only 5-5 in their last 10 games. Chicago is in the mix. We knew Chicago was going to be an interesting team. Rob noted in the Heartland that this is as late into the season that Yellow Springs has been over 500, and they are 20-19. They're still heavily in the mix. Louisville has had some troubles with their pitching staff, which I think was a little surprising. I thought they would be stronger. I think Brian thought they would be stronger. Des Moines is the San Fernando of the Heartland. They started off with a kind of a kick in the pants, and now I notice both of you guys are 7-3 over the last 10, so you're making a bit of a run. Twin Cities also started off low. They're kind of back into the mix. I think the Heartland is going to be a scrum, and I will stick to my guns. I do not believe Nashville is going to win the Heartland. I believe that somebody else will win the Heartland. My money is still on Twin Cities, but
Yeah.
obviously there's a lot more, a lot more to play there.
Yeah, they're the smart money right now. I love my base runs, and Twin Cities is the leader in the clubhouse in the Heartland there. What's interesting is that, I mean, the difference between my team and Des Moines is my team like the players are playing bad. And Des Moines has some individual statistical performances that indicate they should have a better record. So they actually have a better expected win loss than Nashville does right now. And that's why Nashville is kind of down in those playoff odds, because that's what the playoff odds calculates off of, is that expected win loss.
Right.
So I think they're third in their division, and Nashville's playing a few games above their Pythag and that base run metric. I mean, one thing to keep in mind with Nashville, though, speaking earlier about Super 2 dates and everything, I'm trying to figure out what they're doing with Carter Kramer. Like, is Chad really trying to hold out all the way to the Super 2 date? Because last I checked, he's still in AAA. He's got a left fielder in Joffer who's not playing very well. I think he was hoping Joffer would play well and he could trade him. But, like, I mean, is Kramer going to spend a whole nother month in the minors? He was, like, arguably the best player in the Frick last year, maybe not even arguably. And it looks like he needs to be racking up the wins now. Like, I do think his team will look better on paper once Kramer's up. But, like, you get the wins now while Des Moines is struggling and Twin Cities is, maybe slightly underperforming, and put yourself in that spot. So I'm kind of surprised about that.
Yeah. No, I think Kramer is a interesting study in the BBA comic book world, right? Because in real life, there is no situation where Carter Kramer would be allowed to be down in AAA. And I don't mean that from the Major League Baseball BBA commissioner's kind of point of view. I'm talking about that from the PR game. I mean, the players' union would be filing legal suits in this situation, and the Nashville general manager would be literally forced by, unless he has Trumpian lack of shame, right? Which Chad does not. Chad is a hardcore, hard competitor. But the reason that Carter Kramer is down in AAA right now is he literally just has no places on the 40-man, on the active roster to put him without losing a 40-man player. And so, yes, Joffer is the most likely candidate to go, but then somebody has to give Chad something that he feels is properly worth it. Otherwise, Kramer will stick for another year on AAA. I mean, that's the dynamic. Unless it ends up to be true that we get down to the trade deadline and Nashville is hanging third in the Heartland, at which state I think Chad's pride will kick in, and he will take whatever he can get for Joffer, because he will make every effort to win if he possibly can. Right now, I believe that Nashville kind of has this uber champions aura around them, and that Chad believes he's going to win the division whether he has Carter Kramer on the roster or not right now, and it may turn out to be true. I mean, at which point you say, hey, he won his division, that's the right business case, because the business case for a general manager is to win divisions, to win games, and to put the best team you can on the field for the life of the team, right? It would be, it is easily argued that to bring Carter Kramer up right now would literally hurt the value of the team because you have to make a less than value-based trade of Joffer. Right. So you hurt the overall value of the team simply because whatever. If he were in the MLB, he would not want to go to jail or lose a lawsuit, right? Whatever the ramifications of losing that lawsuit would be.
Yeah. I mean, Joffer would be really good on a bench, though. So I feel like the quick fix is to find a lesser player on the roster. Like, you said, I haven't looked at it. Sounds like maybe he's like kind of out of options with
Yeah.
most of his roster. Then you trade the last guy on the bench, clear the spot, get something. But that's what makes Chad so good. I think you mentioned last time that sometimes with trades you're just willing to sort of get what you can, move on, and Chad doesn't really do that. Chad maximizes his return, and so if he doesn't get, like you said, what he wants for Joffer's not going to get traded for pennies on the dollar. He'll make sure that he turns that asset into exactly what it should be worth. He's a good player, so he's not wrong that Joffer should get him back some talent. But
and if
hey,
you're
we're
in,
doing right now. They're making him pay the behemoth tax.
there you go. And if you're in that situation and the last man on the last man on the roster is your primary utility infielder, I'm not making that deal either because, if Brooks Elliott gets hurt, somebody's got to play. And Carter Kramer and Joffer cannot play shortstop. Right. So you've got roster situations that you have to deal with. You could make perhaps an argument that the bottom part of the bullpen could go, but then, the bullpen usage is a weird OOTP art unto itself. And, I don't like losing. I carry 12 pitchers. Am I going to carry 11? That's dangerous. You suddenly have a 19-inning game and you lose 3 games in a row because you blew out your bullpen. No, that's not a good idea. So, those are practical ramifications for that kind of thing. But turning around, the most intriguing division in the league right now, from my point of view, is the Frontier, where we've seen Calgary and Las Vegas make, in quotes, big jumps. But notice that the big jumps are all 7-3 in the last 10 games. You're not seeing teams run off with 9 and 10 wins in a sim right now, which maybe says something about the competitive environment, right? Our beloved Phoenix Talons have dropped into a tie now with Las Vegas after having only a 500 last 10 games. Rosenblatt, Justin's prognosis of getting to 85 wins plus is looking stout right now. He's 22-17 in Rosenblatt. You talked about Ben and Boise complaining vociferously about a difficult start, but they're 18-21, and they've hit a bit of a rough patch. Never know.
It's 21 in run differential though, and there's something there, and they're getting pretty good performance out of a couple of those pitchers they added over the offseason. Ben got a little bit of criticism, I think, for those pitchers, but Turner is pitching well. Clark is pitching very well. Wojciechowski, not so much, but hey, 2 out of 3 is a pretty good success rate for adding veteran pitchers over the offseason.
Yeah, and to be fair, the main concern about those pitcher ads were not this year and next year, but out into the future, right? There's some risk for those guys. But that may play into Ben's angst also, because he needs his offense he needs his team to be kind of hitting on all cylinders right now, because if you buy into that idea that those pitcher contracts are risky for 3 and 4 years out, kind of now is the time. And so I can understand the angst. I definitely understand the angst from Ben's point of view. It is a little bit early in the season to get too out there. But I think Ben and Vancouver Aaron, are built from the same cloth, right? What have you done for me lately? I always enjoy listening to both of them get too excited when things are going really well and get too, from my perspective, right? I try to keep a semi-even keel on things and not get too, not allow my irked side to get too bothered when I don't start well, and also not get too flamboyant when things are going particularly well. But I enjoy watching and listening to the two of them conversing about their teams as they go, because they wear their emotions on their sleeves, and that makes it fun. But I think neither Boise nor Vancouver are in dire straits right now. They just have had difficult starts, and both. I mean, the Pacific is a highly competitive division, just like the Frontier. I don't know that there is a mega team in either one of these two divisions, which makes that competition feel even bigger, right? You can make an argument that Charm City and Montreal and Charlotte, when Nata is playing, could be considered to be the big mega teams in their division. Nashville is obviously the big mega team in the Heartland. Sacramento has been the big mega team for the Pacific, with Portland kind of as a sidekick. But both of them are beatable. Vegas is as close to a mega team as you could have gotten in the Frontier, but even they have been up and down for a while. So I am really enjoying watching the Frontier hackle this out. 4 teams within 2 games is quite the interesting mess. And Boise at 6 games back is just kind of hanging in the draft, waiting to see what happens. San Antonio has been. I didn't expect San Antonio to really be in the mix as much, and I wouldn't say that they're doing the thing, but they're not. One solid, 6-1 sim, and they're smack dab back into it.
Yeah, it's still early. I do think Mexico City kind of reminds me of Phoenix from last year, where they're kind of a bad luck team, and I don't think Mexico City was like a favorite to win the division or anything, but I think they're a better team than Austin and San Antonio, yet they find themselves in 8th. So they're kind of propping those 2 teams up a spot in the standings right now, and I think they're going to be a hard team for those playoff contender teams at the top of the division to beat for the rest of the year. They're not going to be as easy of a picking as that 14-25 record might indicate they would be. But Brandon's probably also going to have to face some tough decisions on, maybe having to trade some players off. So, like you said earlier, injuries will help clarify pictures, but so will trades. Some teams are going to add some talent. And if Mexico City trades off a couple of veterans, maybe they are a little easier to beat later in the season.
Yeah. And given the competitive nature of things, my future looking brain starts asking, when will trade deadline really be this year?
Yeah,
right?
Because in June or July last year, basically.
Yeah, because in out of the park leagues, in particular, in online baseball leagues, it doesn't go day to day, and things happen. In Major League Baseball, trade deadline really kind of begins to heat up about 3 weeks to a month before, and then starts to really happen more a week or 3 before the trade deadline. For us, yes. You look down the list of teams and what players they have as they begin to fall out. And once a team begins to fall out, the game theory from the losing team, from the fire sale team, is oftentimes the first team to fire sale makes the biggest return. Right? And a part of that is because if you trade a big name at the end of June, then you've got July, August, and September for the receiving team to receive that benefit. If you wait until the end of August, you've only got 1 month of benefit. And at that stage, you're talking usually about a rental where the return is not particularly high. So this game theory is an interesting one for this competitive world. I'm figuring that Madison ought to be trading me Carlos Cruz here any minute for essentially, nothing. That's my game theory.
I'll take Stickler then from San Antonio. You can have Cruz.
That's a deal. I tell you, you have heard it here, folks. The first set of BBA Today 2063 deals, we'll just mark it in. I'm sure that neither Mark nor Tim will have any problems with this whatsoever.
Guys, a little bit of cash. Make it work.
Yeah, there you go. We'll be submitting it in Stats Plus here, and they can just click it and go. And it'll work out fine.
Just sign the paperwork, yeah.
So yeah, pretty exciting for a mid-May time period, which is usually when the scrum starts to settle out. I don't know that it has really settled out that heavily yet, which makes me happy. So anyway. We've had a couple of different ideas for things to chat about on our list for several cycles right now and just had them kind of bounced out. One of those things is at one point you asked me about thoughts on the need for a player projection system inside out of the park. So let's get down into the kind of OOTP NEEP. What do you mean by that? What are your thoughts when you're asking for a player projection system?
I'm speaking, my favorite has always been Zips. That's something I've been following since Dave Szymborski was posting it to the Baseball Think Factory, which I think is a now defunct website. But it's a purely statistical model. So I find it intriguing because I think a majority of GMs or a majority of decisions are made based on player ratings, and I think they probably should be. But I do think it would be interesting to see a purely statistical projection of what a player is likely to produce for a season. There's a few other popular ones. If you go to Fangraphs, you can see a few on the page. Steamer is another one that gets talked about, and this ask is unrealistic, I think, because there's a ton of work that goes into these statistical models, and as you've said before, I don't think one or two game developers are just gonna set up shop and develop a Zips on the side while they're also trying to keep the game running. But I feel like a lot of conversations happen within our league without really just like sort of a grounded baseline of just what is like a realistic outcome for a player or expectation. And I think that's a lot of times where disagreements really just originate from. It's just like, it'd almost be easier if each person having the conversation was just like, well, here's what I think the player's going to do next year. And then the other person does the same thing, and you maybe realize, oh, we're kind of just using different adjectives for the same stat line. Like, we have the same general concept of a player. Or you find out, like, what the heck? No way that guy's going to hit 40 home runs, like, what are you talking about? And, those models are based off of usually like comparison players. So the model will go find like the 20 most similar players statistically. If you go to baseballreference.com, you'll see that kind of stuff. Like for each year of a player's season, you can see what player was most similar statistically. And then it just kind of aging curve projects those players out based on those comps. And it would just be really cool to open the page, just like I do in real life, where I open a Fangraphs page. And Fangraphs even has like a rest of season projection. That would probably be maybe like a little too much information for a game like this. But I just think it'd be really cool to, at the start of the year, kind of see like, here's your Zips page for your team. Here's the statistical projection. And then we all would know in the background like that a bunch of dev report type development changes have happened with a player, and no longer capable of that because the guy lumped 2 points in every category. Or the statistical engine doesn't realize that this player has figured out how to unlock their power now, and this home run projection's way too low. Something like that. But another player I feel like that it would especially underscore for this year would be Lane's first baseman, Gustavo. I'm blanking on his last name, but his first baseman who took the hit
Like
What Espinosa?
Espinosa?
Espinosa.
Espinosa.
He took the big lump in the dev lab, lost 2 points of power. A statistical model wouldn't know anything about that because he hit 40 home runs again and fine, and it really kind of underscore how much he got screwed by this dev lab result. But I don't know, it's just the thing I've always really been interested in when it comes to Major League Baseball. Is I love looking at the projections each year for each team, like when the Zips posts to Fangraphs, and it'd just be like a neat conversation starter, I think, and would
Yeah.
drive more engagement and content, in the BBA world, content, team news posts and whatnot, to just kind of here's guys who I think are going to overperform or underperform. But obviously, there's issues and limitations with this concept as well. And we could do it,
Mhm.
somebody could do it offline. Like
Right.
I said, it's a pretty big undertaking, so it's probably not super realistic, but um, it's just data, and it would want to be based on Brewster players. We have a long enough history that you would want to develop some comp scores for players, and then look at the career arc of those 20 comp players or whatever, and it would statistically just kind of spit something out based on past performance.
Yeah. No, I think that would be a lot of fun. Um, and you're right, it
We're,
could be done
we're such
as.
nerds about
What's
this.
that?
I said we're such nerds about this. It sounds like a lot of fun, right?
No, it does sound like a lot of fun, and I mean, my brain goes to a whole bunch of different, um, different permutations of that, and I think, yeah, that's the kind of thing, to a degree, different environment, but to a degree, it's a similar thought pattern as Bob and Eric are doing with their own minor league projections, right? They're taking all the information from out of the park. They're putting their own weightings onto things and adjusting things based on the way they think about prospect age and gap between ratings and time development, right? They're trying to come up with a better projection system for prospects, right? What you're suggesting is utilizing a better projection system um, for the BBA, and I think the value of that is that, yes, we see the ratings go up and down, right? Um, in that sense, a scout, a real Major League Baseball scout, may see things that the Zips or Pacoda or other kind of projection systems wouldn't see because they are backward looking, right? They're backward looking, and then, like you said, using aging projections based on real information to pretend like they can say what a player is going to do. It's like Bill James used to do with the minor league equivalencies,
Yep.
back before it became classic to understand that minor league stats actually meant something, right? Because they do. Minor league stats mean something in context of competition and age and all sorts of stuff like that. And so whenever you hear somebody say minor league stats don't mean something, they don't actually pay attention to what um, to what's going on. What if they're smart, they mean that the individuals mean that before you take a minor league stat as meaning anything of value, you need to understand the context it was made in, at which point then they can mean something. And in that sense, for example, all of our high school and college stats that are completely bloated don't mean anything in context of a Major League Baseball number. A high school pitcher with a 6.5 ERA is still potentially really good right now because that environment is massively offensive, right, relative to all the other pitchers. Blah. So yeah, I love that fundamental idea. Another thing that strikes me is, you mentioned that the developers are only a couple of people. And that really plays for me because of the AI question, making decisions, etc. For a situation like this, they could do something quite similar, and I may actually ping them about the idea. Back a decade ago, a real life decade ago, when people were complaining about the out of the park injury system, Marcus went out and licensed and worked with like Clay Davenport, I can't remember his name.
Yep,
A guy
that's
who,
his name.
a guy who did a whole bunch of work on Major League Baseball injuries, and he basically contracted with him to help him work out what the injury system ought to be. And so we can complain about the injury system, and especially I will complain about who gets fragile and when they don't get fragile and things like that. But fundamentally, when you look at the injuries that happen, they mimic really closely what happens to a real baseball player from the timing and the numbers and different things like that. So that's kind of Matt's big push when it comes to the injury thing. He likes realistic because he wants to have even more injuries because that's what's real, right? And that actually started once they licensed to somebody who knew what they were doing and put it into the game. Suddenly you had a wave of people complaining because there were too many injuries. and the answer was, well, yes, but go look at Major League Baseball injury lists right now. Right. Pay attention, and you will notice that all of them have lots of injuries. The interesting nuance in our situation, meaning out of the park leagues, is, and this is not a reason not to do it, is how many people will look at a out of the park zips and say, well, that's just the number. That's what will happen. That's what should, and then when something doesn't happen that way, they will then complain about the game because it's not realistic. It didn't hit the projections, right? They will confuse ratings and who's Lane's guy again?
Gustavo
Gustavo
Espinosa.
Espinosa, right? The fact that out of the park leagues who play with scouts will not see Espinosa's drop until the scouts re-scout him, and if they get it right, and all that other good stuff, right?
Yeah.
So by definition, they will still see Espinosa as projecting to whatever the number is, and then when he crashes and burns, that will really annoy them. Whereas for us, when we see the ratings bar drop, that's just really a timing thing, right? We still don't know exactly where Espinosa is. We've talked about that in all the gaps, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And we also don't know whether Espinosa is going to bounce back because Out of the Park has all sorts of interesting, weird development paths where they could well structure him back up over the next year. I have no idea. I have no idea how that
works. He's retained his potential on the scouting report, so that's the interesting part. And that's one thing that lately has been kind of frustrating me is just I kind of like that there's a bunch of guys who are 26, 27, 28, 29. I mean, sometimes you even see guys in like their 30s who have unmet potential. I guess I don't know that the game is like whether it's consistent about how it handles that or not. There's other guys who are like bounce back candidates, but their ratings don't show any potential. Then we've seen them, bump back up to what they were before. So sometimes I feel like some of the players, they're like I just cut Graham Aubrey, by the way, from my AAA team, and
Graham Aubrey.
He's the guy I'm thinking of. Like he still has a point of potential he could develop in several categories. He's like 26 or 27. I decided it's probably not going to happen. But it's like funny that the game is keeping that on there, even though he's a bunch and I feel like he's a shell of his former self. But then, like I just sold my old catcher Augusto Annis to Yellow Springs, and he's a guy who used to be better also in his early 20s, but he doesn't have any unmet potential. And it's just kind of like, well, what is the fundamental difference between those two players? And I guess I wish there was like more of a story to like tell my brain of like why isn't Annis a 5 out of 6 contact like Aubrey is? Like what is it about Aubrey that's different? They're both I think 26 years old and peaked when they were 23 or whatever, and I don't really get what the difference is supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean my feeling on that is you're hitting on what is probably the only real value in my mind of OOTP scouts, and that is you can get a better story out of the game in that sense. In the case of Ennis, would an OOTP scout drop his rating right away? Probably not, especially since he's still fairly young. He's what, 26, 25?
Right there, we're both 26.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if and I'm speaking out of school because I don't play with out of the park scouts, so I don't know how they work anymore. But back in the day, the scout would keep his rating fairly high, and then the numbers would not reflect it, and then the over aging, the scout would drop the numbers down to whatever is more accurate. Or if you could scout, back in the days, you used to be able to pick players to scout, and you could scout the same guy 6 times, and he would get more accurate, right? Scouting, and so you would find Ennis had dropped his ratings more rapidly. So you could look at that and say, okay, that fits my concept of baseballness better than we fairly rapidly get a perspective of where his real ratings are. But that breaks the concept, because out of the park is adjusting development and adjusting skills all the time. I mean, all the time. Literally every sim underneath the 1 to 10 bar ratings.
Yeah.
So many over half of the players are changing their numbers 1 and 2 and 3 points at a pop. We don't see that because we don't have the raw numbers.
We'd go crazy if we could, I think.
Yeah. And no, you can go completely. That's one of the reasons why the rating, the Stats Plus development thing was so out of whack in version 25, is because they were doing it even more often. And that was causing us to go ballistic, because you'd see a guy every sim, we'd go up and down and up and down and up and down. From a modeling standpoint, I think that is insane, but that's just me. Who can say? I mean, one day I can lift 72 pounds, and the next day I can lift 75 pounds, and the next day I can lift 73 pounds. I mean, is that because my raw skill got better, or is that because of whatever, or worse, or I don't know. But bottom line is, I think a projection system like that would be a lot of fun, and really not that much work to do.
If they outsource it.
Well, to be blunt about it, give me about 3 days or 2 days, and I can write a script that will do something like that. Now, the question then is, how do I weight all I need is a whole bunch of files that show what the stats are for each of the players, and as long as they're tagged with their IDs, I can go do all sorts of stuff. Like I say, I can take me about 30 seconds to write a thing that will input all of the data, then a lot more time to cut it and figure out how to whatever, and then a lot more time to fix all my bugs, because I'm a horrible rot gut coder.
Right, but like Pagoda and Zips and all of them are like competing to claim they're the most accurate, right? So they're like focused on getting the as accurate as possible. But to your point, you can get 90% of the way there relatively easily, and that would probably that would scratch the itch I was describing, which is just like spit out like statistical baseline. You need some sort of aging curve thing. You need ballpark and league factors and stuff, but just show like a guy who's 24. If he was 23 and hit 25 home runs, what's a 24-year-old like? They're probably gonna hit 29 home runs or whatever that number is, and it'd be cool. But it is kind of a marketing opportunity for one of those projection systems too. Now I kind of want to do my best to broker this. You can get like Baseball Prospectus. I feel like would benefit from put Pagoda into the game in some way, and you probably drive more membership because people playing the game.
And fundamentally, just to be open, I do that kind of thing right now with raw ratings when I test for out of the park. I don't really get in and play the game and watch all the things going, because quite honestly, that's boring as hell to me unless we're playing out of the park as a online league. I just do not care about solo individual. These don't matter to me. But I get deeply interested in aging curves and so forth. And so from a projection standpoint, I can tell you what the baseline development curves are for each skill set without any real question, within the context of a normal, everyday, out of the park game, right? So I could easily lay those out on things, so the development curve does not bother me at all. So yeah, I think ultimately, if I were an out of the parks development standpoint, that idea is quite interesting. And if I were leading their organization, I would probably go see if I could connect with some of the people who are doing it and see if they would license me their algorithms, and then plug it in and go. Right. I doubt I would do that if I were to get so excited about it to go out and actually code it as Ron. I would call it Ron's projections, and everyone would know that they're silly, right? They're whatever I think, right? If I'm out of the park, I don't know that I would do Matt Arnold's projections, because then suddenly his context is a different context. So I would want to make sure I did something that was authentic with somebody who was actually known for doing a good job, like Clay Davenport with injuries, right? It was very, very hard for anybody complaining about out of the park to complain about injuries after they licensed Clay Davenport's models, because it was like, go take it up with them.
Right? The best there is, right?
Go
like,
take it up with them.
Leading science, yeah.
Right. Maybe it's wrong, but boy, there's a lot of data there, right? So anyway, we talked about David Ackerman just a short while ago, and his injury. Let me turn the conversation around to another one of the topics that we've been kind of kicking down the road, and that is even more players who are active, who are on our Hall of Fame ballots, and because there's a few more that I think we dropped off last time. David Ackerman is definitely one of those. I don't think we talked about David Ackerman last time.
No.
But for me,
he was the guy I was thinking of, though.
Yeah,
for sure.
He's always my number one poster child for that kind of conversation, because I even made that comment back when he was 22 or 23, saying as long as he doesn't get hurt, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. Right this minute, he's hurt. I think he'll come back. But then the question that you were asking earlier is, does he already have a Hall of Fame? I mean, if he doesn't come back, is David Ackerman a Hall of Famer?
I'm a bigger Hall guy, so my answer is yes. He's already done what he needs to, because of a few reasons. And this one doesn't really appeal to me, but I know it appeals to a lot of voters. Just he's won some championships. He's been on one team, which is really cool, and that team has been a dynasty for over a decade now. But just looking at like the seasons Ackerman's had and the awards he's won, he's been, I think, the face of those teams. I mean, Hector Silva, yes, as on the pitching side, has been the face of those pitching staffs. But Dave Ackerman has been sort of the key for them. There's just not a lot of players that are hitting 40. Looks like he's hit 50 home runs once, but he's been in the mid 40s of home runs several times, playing the defense he plays at second base. Just a really unique skill set, and I can't imagine he's got a lot of peers in the history book of the BBA at second base for that combination of skills. Now he's at 391 home runs right now, so probably nice to see him get to that nice round number of 400 for some people, but that's a lot of home runs for a second baseman who's played like his whole career with 10 range and been an incredible defender, and the best defender at his position pretty much that whole time period as well. So in my mind, Ackerman is sort of like the Mike Trout case of like, he's already had the peak that he needs to have. And you mentioned the last time we talked about this. This is really interesting to think about. Like, yeah, what if he just like falls off a cliff and he just kind of struggles and plays for 6 different teams over the next 5 years and doesn't put up much WAR? Like, how much does that hurt his case? And I guess it would. So, but I think if he had a career-ending injury, knock on wood, I don't want that to happen. But if he were, like, I think he should go in at this point just for the 12-year run that he's been on.
Yeah, I don't know how you can possibly say that he's been like the elite defender. He's only got 7 Zimmer awards. I mean, yeah, I think
I can't believe he doesn't have one every year,
there you
to
go.
be honest.
The interesting question for Ackerman is his position. If you look at actually, I should be careful because, again, this has been a couple of seasons since I've gone, a couple of actual years, so probably 10 seasons since I've gone there and looked at the details. But second base is a highly underrepresented position inside the Hall of Fame. I think if you line him up against second baseman right now, that he would be almost automatic in. I do think he'll be helped by the fact that he should get to 400 without any real problems. I mean, even if he comes back and struggles for the next 5 years, he should hit 9 home runs. That shouldn't that should not be a problem for Dave Ackerman.
Yeah.
And the overall story behind him, and yes, being a Charm City guy through all of the rings and championships and so forth can't hurt. Clearly, I am a Dave Ackerman acolyte, syncopath, whatever the right term is, because I've been on him. Pardon me. I've been on him for quite some time. One of the main reasons I said when he was 22 or 23 that he was on a path is because he was a second baseman, and a very good one. So, but the BBA has not been particularly good at rewarding middle infielders, even when they are elite defenders. So the bar for him at 57 WAR, I think he's got right now. Yes, if he were to fall off a cliff at 57 WAR, I think he's not going to be on some people's ballots. He'll be on mine, but there will be an argument. It comes back and he plays particularly well for the next 6 years at 4 year, 24 more WAR, 70, 81 WAR. I think that's
he's a lock.
Then he's an absolute lock. He still probably won't be unanimous, but I don't really care about unanimous.
He hasn't played for Phoenix, so we know he's missing one vote.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Who else you got? Who else is on your list of people who you think are already in?
I think his teammate Hector Silva is like finish out this year strong away from kind of being in that territory as well, especially with was it a perfect game he just threw earlier in the year? Like, he's racked up the awards. How many Nebraskas does he have? Let's see here. Is it 3? I want to say he's got at least a couple.
Let's see.
Second, third,
only 4 times.
Second, wins it. He won it 3 years in a row.
Yeah, he's got
4 years in a row. He's got 4, and then he's got 3 second places and a third.
Yeah, he's no.
What a ridiculous. How many does he have? Was he 5? Was he 4? Okay.
Says 4.
Yeah, so maybe my argument here won't stand up to the voters that we have, but he's basically got Flores' peak already. And Flores kind of fell off. So is he going to hold on, throw some more innings, help with the counting stats a little bit? But that's all he'd be missing. I think most of us agree that Flores, I'm careful with my wording here. I think I can say most because that's more than 50%, and I think he got more than 50% of the vote. My eyes twitching, but most of us think Flores is a Hall of Famer. I mean, Silva has kind of matched that. He's also got the one team win the champion. All the stuff I said about Ackerman, and then he's got the perfect game and a couple of no hitters, I think, to go with it. So I think Silva's almost there too, where I think his peak value just pushes him in. Maybe one more good year, just finish out this year.
Yeah, Flores missed by one vote, so
Okay,
he will be in.
I couldn't
It's
remember.
just a question of
Yeah,
time, I think.
yeah,
And we are getting to the point. We've had multiple different ways of voting for Hall of Fame over the years of the BBA, with the method being similar to Major League Baseball right now, being helped by the fact that Stats Plus does all of the admin. I assume they'll continue to do that. And we are getting to the point where first ballot is actually interesting, right? There are some guys who come in the second, third, fourth, fifth, later ballots, and they don't necessarily fit the pantheons. Chris Wilson, if anybody wants to go back into the BBA media guides, Chris Wilson did a fantastic multiple feature thing over a couple of different media guides where he broke the Hall of Fame pantheon down into 4 tiers, right? And I think usually the guy, the Aaron Haney's, the question we're asking with Flores is, does he belong in the upper pantheon of all Hall of Famers, right? Right this minute, Silva to me is a borderline case. And the reason that he's borderline is because he's 56 WAR, and if you look at the WAR numbers for starting pitchers across the board, he's never won 20 games. Wins don't matter this much anymore, except that they do, right? He's at 151 wins right now. I think he's got to get up in the range of 200 before people will put him on the ballot. He does have the aura at this stage, since we've started republishing those pitching rankings, that it's very clear that he is always in the top, right? It's been a very rare day in the BBA where he has not been listed as the best long-running starting pitcher in the league since 2057. That will probably carry some weight. For example, it carried weight for me for Danya Chekhanov, right? I was not on the line with Chekhanov being a Hall of Famer until I started actually looking at his era and the pitchers and where he was in that overall scope of things. And I went, crap, he's got to be in. And so I started including him on my list. I think there will be some people who will vote for Silva simply for that kind of long-term upper tier guy. And the thing that I find a very impressive piece is, he led the league in FIP 5 years in a row. He led the league in pitcher WAR 4 years in a row. That's a super high peak. If you're a peak Hall of Fame guy, you can't complain about that. So even if Silva were to lose a bunch and go down to a 2 WAR player pitcher for the next 4 years, and he ends up at 65, you look at his peak and you go, I think he's in. But I think he's got work to do. If he were to fall off the planet right this minute, I would say he is not a first ballot Hall of Famer as it stands right now. But
yeah, I think that's reasonable expectation. It does seem like he was Superman there for 4 years. Now he's just one of the very best pitchers. He's at the top of your model, so I guess he's the best starter, but he's clearly not in his prime anymore. But I think if he finishes out the year, it's hard to argue. If he has another 5-win season or whatever, where he has close to 200 strikeouts and wins 15 games and blah, 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 blah. He's pretty much there. I think the notoriety is a big part of it, playing with the one team. But yeah, if he bounced, the same thing. If he bounced around got hurt and played for a few different teams and kind of fell off, that would really hurt it. But yeah, he's on that track for sure.
Well, talk to me about another guy. And here's a 68 WAR pitcher right now, Barney Lindsay.
Yeah,
sitting in Yellow Springs. Is Barney Lindsay at 251 wins and 68 WAR? Is Barney Lindsay a Hall of Famer?
Right, like when he left Nashville, or a year or two before he left Nashville, we're in some parallel universe where a version of Ron and Kurt call them we're John and Bert in a parallel universe having the same conversation, right? Because he kind of had that same resume, and now he's doing the thing where he's played for 3 different teams in 3 years, and he's still pitching pretty well. I think his ERA isn't quite showing the quality of the innings he's been logging, but he's kind of getting beat up this year in Yellow Springs, so maybe this is sort of the end of the line for him. I think he's a Hall of Famer for a few reasons. He's got 251 wins, and 300 wins is a ridiculous standard nowadays. And I think 250, if not lower than that. I feel like the 300 win threshold nowadays is like 230 or something realistically, and so 251 is a big number in that category. He had that long run with Nashville where he pitched for one team and won quite a few awards. Was a big face of that franchise in that run. I think the thing that hurts him when you look at his page in Stats Plus, where they kind of baseball reference style highlight it for you when they lead the league, is he never was like super elite. He never was leading the league in many categories. It looks like he led the league in WAR once and wins 3 times, but part of that was the team he was on. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he's pretty close to the end of the line, but that's partially because I'm a big Hall guy. I think he's kind of probably teetering on the edge for realistic chances just because of how tough our voting block is.
Yeah, our voting block would be pretty tough, but he is a really interesting case to line up against Silva in that sense, because Lindsay's case is about long-term really good, not brilliant, lead the league in everything for 4 or 5 years, right? So he's got a different profile. He's 38 years old. Yes, he's at the end. I mean, maybe he'll get another year or two out. But 2-time Nebraska winner, 3-time champion, 68 WAR. Silva was at 57. So, at the end of the day, and Lindsay never really led the league in a whole bunch of things. You look at his Hall of Fame metrics. I just called him up. His JAWS is 60, where the average is 69, so it doesn't score particularly well there. His black ink, which is leading the league and stuff, is 17 versus the average of 33. His gray ink, which is being on the leaderboards, is 241 against a 166. So, that basically says he was always in the mix, but he was never at the top, which is an interesting nuance. So that leads him with Hall of Fame standards and monitors as getting him in. So the point is they're mixed, right? Lindsay is on my ballot, assuming I have enough spaces for him.
Well put, yeah.
Right. He's one of those guys that I believe belongs in the Hall of Fame. 251 wins, you're right. I mean, 300 wins is an impossible level because really it's only Nebraska and Woolen-Weber, right? And that leads me to think of Bill James wrote this great Hall of Fame article about the Willie Mays Hall of Fame. I don't know if you've read it or not, but it is a fantastic satirical takedown of small hall people, where you get, have you read that?
I've heard it referenced. Okay. I don't think I've actually. James is a bit before my time on most things. I probably should go back and read more.
Yeah, he's a fun. Or no, it wasn't Bill James. It was Joe Posnanski. That's Joe Posnanski did that. Posnanski is one of my favorite sports writers of all times. So rather than strip you of the fun, I will drop you a link sometime, and you can go through that. I'll find it and do a search on Joe Posnanski and Willie Mays Hall of Fame. Everyone, do a Google on Joe Posnanski and Willie Mays Hall of Fame, and revel in the takedown of small hall kind of thoughts.
Actually, I think I did read this. Yeah, no, I like Posnanski quite a bit. It looks familiar.
So Barney Lindsay, if he does not make it, he's going to not make it because of the small hall folks being unimpressed with his run of, for example, you look down his WAR totals from the time he was 28, 29, I guess. He made 2.1 WAR with a Nashville team, right? And
Throwing 220 innings, no
right.
less.
And from that point on, he never made more than 5. He only made more than 5 WAR 4 times. Oh no, 5 times. That was all before he was 26. So
Chad will appreciate this because Chad is a Yankees fan. I actually just pulled up Andy Pettit's page, and a fellow left-hander. He reminds me a ton of what Andy Pettit did. Andy Pettit never really led the league and stuff either, but he just lasted forever,
right,
and accrued a bunch of stats. And I think Andy Pettit should be in the Major League Baseball Hall of Fame, and I think Lindsay's got a similar case.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So yeah, I was interested in your point of view. I assumed he would be on your list just simply because you are a big Hall kind of a guy, but I enjoy comparing the Lindsay career profile and the Silva kind of career profile, because they're going to be very different. If Silva continues down the path, he's going to be a lock. Lindsay is not a lock, but he's really good. So, who else do you got?
All right, I got one last name for you. Otherwise, you start getting down to the guys who we're still in their late 20s and are sub 40 WAR, and then it's kind of like, oh well, they're on the track. But the other one's Resurrection Santos, who would not have been a surprise at all to be a part of this conversation a couple of years ago, and then he kind of hit a skid a little bit in his late 20s, and skids for Resurrection Santos just means sub 4 WAR, but Calgary paid an arm and a leg to go get him, so they needed him to be putting up more 4 WAR for what he's making salary-wise per year. They put him in right field last year, and it seems to have rejuvenated him. All of a sudden, he's a plus fielder at his position again, and offensively, he's back on track, getting his OPS over 900. He's got 60 WAR. He's got a career OPS of 877, and the key thing is always just the defense for me. Like when guys can hit like that and then be premium defenders, and Santos really was an excellent center fielder in his prime. That's a guy who is already on my Hall of Fame ballot. I think he led the league in WAR twice. He's had 2 8 WAR seasons. Those are just monster years. He hit 351, 361 a couple times. He's never been a 40 home run guy, but he's hit 30 home runs 5 times. Just a really special player with a really, really huge peak, kind of a Silva-esque peak there. Without some of the consistent hardware. He's played for a couple teams that haven't gotten maybe quite as much attention, but I think he won a championship back when he was in Rocky Mountain. So really, really great player. And I think another guy who finish out the year, throw a couple more WAR on the stack, and then that's a Hall of Famer, I think.
Yeah, the real life player that I will bring up, and it's a dangerous one to bring up, is Barry Bonds. He's got the interesting argument that the argument I find most intriguing about Barry Bonds and the Hall of Fame is, if you'd have just cut off his career at age 33 or whatever the number is, before all the steroid questions began to come about and his head grew 6 times the normal size, his career was already on path for the Hall of Fame. You could almost argue it was there, and Santos's is quite like that right now. Playing solid defense in a super important defensive place. Moving to right field is still an important defensive place. And yeah, he's on path for, 1.1 WAR right now, so he's on path for another 5 WAR kind of a season. I see no reason why Resurrection Santos would not be in the Hall of Fame if he were to be cut off at the knees right now, right? It'd be like a Sandy Koufax conversation, right? Koufax was put in immediately. But if you were to add up his counting numbers and all that stuff, obviously they are not as strong because he didn't play the last 4 or 5. His arm would not allow him to play for another 4 or 5 years and rack up more counting stats. But his aura was completely there, and I can't imagine Resurrection Santos would not make it. He may not make it on a first ballot if he were to stop right this minute, simply because of the 55 WAR and so forth. But eventually, I think he would be in. Now, that having been said, I think he's going to play another 5 years, and he's going to put up another 25 WAR, and he'll be an 80 or 90 WAR guy, and I think it'll be essentially a slam dunk. Again, maybe not unanimous, unless he plays in Phoenix. But, there you go.
Plus, he was born in the greatest city in the world, Chicago. So that's going to net him quite a few extra votes.
There you go. I'm a big fan of Chicago. I would love to live in Chicago if it weren't for the weather.
You just stay inside, Ron. You just forget that it's doing that stuff outside.
There you go. I like that a lot. Because Resurrection Santos was the last guy, official guy on my list. I've got 3 more that I just want to throw out for just a general purpose conversation because relief pitcher, right? Manuel Barrera, Todd Stone, and Felix Vidaka are all going to be on the list here sometime fairly soon. And when I was jotting these down, Barrera had like 500 saves and 3 rings, couple of Egans, but only 20-ish WAR. Todd Stone is at 40 WAR, right, as a relief pitcher. Vidaka was at 39 WAR, and as a weird starter, mostly reliever. I would expect that these guys are not going to make the Hall of Fame, but they are 3 guys who will be on my lists if I have room for them. So what are your thoughts about the idea of elite relievers? And I think specifically of Barrera at 510 saves. I mean, discount the stat. 510 saves is a lot of saves. I mean,
yeah,
it's a lot of saves.
and for Major League Baseball standards, 29 B WAR is a lot of WAR for a reliever too. You look at a lot of the guys who get a lot of saves in real life, and they'll have 15, 20 WAR over the course of their career. Barrera had 20 F WAR, if you want to call it that. I know it's not perfectly analogous, but
right.
I would default exactly as you described it, and this is how I feel about almost all relievers. I feel the same way in like real life when I fill out like fake Major League Baseball Hall of Fame ballots, which is the relievers just get a spot if there's a spot. I would personally put in like all the hitter, pretty much everyone we've talked about, all 3 of these relievers, even though they've been so good, and that's just I treat the same when I build my teams in OOTP. It's the same thing. I don't show a lot of respect to relievers. The guys you mentioned, I think Stone would get a lot of. He got a lot of extra attention because he played for Vegas there for a while, and he's been on some good teams. And I think he was kind of a boogeyman of the league. As I was joining, of like, that's what a great reliever looks like, is Todd Stone. He was kind of like that mold. So he has that going for him. Barrera has the saves, and then Vidaka's probably interesting because none of the stats are going to pop out. It's just like a leverage thing, right? It's like a WAR per inning thing that would be his best indicator. But that's I just made up that stat, right? Like that's not really a thing that usually gets talked about. So he probably would have the hardest case, I would think, of the 3, and that's a shame because he might be the best pitcher of the 3. At least think he's a better pitcher than Barrera. But Barrera, with all those saves, is probably the guy who would have the easiest time getting the votes.
Yeah, no, I think that's actually one of the dichotomy complexities of relief pitchers. The whole, when you get a really super good relief pitcher who can be a stopper, a real stopper, then you have a super valuable player, but his stats are not going to win the day. So, which is always interesting, I think. But I wanted to bring those three up because they are on my list of players who, in a completely kind world, would be given a really strong conversation about their situation, because I think they are three of the most valuable relievers who are playing in the league at this. From a career standpoint, there are some arms that are much more vibrant right now. And so none of these guys are going to be winning any Egan's, I don't believe, going forward. But there you go. So anyway, that was fun. I think wrapping it up, let's... looking forward to anything in particular over this next sim or two?
The magical June 1st date for me, I guess. I like multiplying the numbers by 3 instead of by 4 to project the full season. Hopefully my Bears keep trending upward. You've kind of hinted at that a couple times. My team's playing a little bit better.
Yep.
I'm just excited to see like the races solidify. Who's in, who's out, the wild card, and then trades will start happening. Trades are kind of fun. I love talking about trades, so I think we'll have some trades to talk about potentially as soon as like next time. Like you said, somebody will jump the gun and start selling off some players just to position themselves at the front of that line. So if not a week from now, probably 2 weeks from now, we'll definitely have trades to talk about.
Yeah, there you go. Well, thank you for your time here today, Kurt. And any parting words for the masses of followers of the BBA today, of our Golden Greek God baseball-y cohorts?
Well, I think June 1st might happen before we talk again, too. So set your short A and rookie ball rosters. Make sure you get them under the limit.
There you go. All righty. Well, thanks for your day. We'll call this a session, and good luck to everyone going through the next couple of sims. It's been a super fun season so far, and knock on fake wood or real wood. Next time we talk, hopefully all of the division chases will be just as much of a scrum as they are right now. So have a great day.
Bye-bye.